Welcome, everybody, and welcome to my very first live YouTube channel. We're actually launching the entire channel with this video. So before anything happens, let me know if you can hear me okay in the chat before I even get going. Let me see. Yes. Can you hear me? I hope so. In the chat. I don't see anybody answering yet. I'm hoping you can. All right, I'm just assuming you can, unless the chat is not happening here. Okay, so welcome to how can, oh good, you can hear us, guess it. There they go, now you come. Yes, yes, yes. Just a little delay. How will you transform your life through hot yoga? Not can, but will. Now, I'm Jimmy Barkan. If you're new, obviously you're new to the channel, but if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and hit the little bell, ring the little bell. We are going to have a Q&A, so please hold your questions, maybe write them down later as we get going. You'll know what to ask, and I will answer those questions at the end. That I promise. Probably nobody on the planet has been practicing hot yoga longer than me. 41 years next month, actually. 41 years next month. I've been teaching almost 40 years. At the end of this year will be 40 years. So let me tell you about my transformation first, and then we're going to break it down, and I'm going to tell you how it definitely will happen for you. I'm driving home. I remember exactly this, specifically the moment. I'm driving back from my yoga class in Beverly Hills, and I just had made the decision to not open my yoga school in California. Instead, I was going to open my yoga school in Florida. And my father said to me, because he had moved to Florida from Pittsburgh, he said, if you come to Florida, I will build you your own yoga school. So he bribed me. But it was a great decision because not only did I have the financial support, but I got to spend the last 20 years of his life with him. And I was very close to my dad and my mom too, but definitely more closer to my dad. And so it made all the difference. And now South Florida has been my home for 38 years. And I love the people here and I love being here. So it was a great decision that I made. But the reason why I'm telling you the story, I'm driving home from class and I'm saying to myself, will I be happy in Florida? Because things were great in California. I was doing class right next to Quincy Jones and Raquel Welch. I don't know if some of you are old enough to know who these people are. I was teaching Martin Sheen privately on the movie set. During lunch, he actually had it in his contract to have an hour and a half yoga break. So I would go on the set and teach him yoga class. I was a guest at his home many times. I was having a great time in Beverly Hills and Hollywood. Am I going to be happy in Florida? I'm driving home from class, and I remember I was feeling so amazing that I said, because of the class, what I call the holistic high, which I believe is far greater than a runner's high or endorphin rush, and we'll get into that later. I said, I'm feeling so great now just from doing my hot yoga. I'll be able to feel like this anytime I want, anywhere I go. And that then was the decision that I made to finally go to Florida. I said, I'm going to be happy there because I'm going to have my yoga with me. And yoga now has been, to me, the backbone of my life, body, mind, and soul. And we'll talk about that. So I can see we have people actually from all over the world. So it's really exciting for you guys to be with me today. And launching my channel, of course. And as I look over here to the side, I don't think I'm neglecting you. These are my cheat sheets. I want to make sure that I remember to say what I wanted to say and write it down. So let's just talk about definitions of yoga real quick, because these are some definitions I believe are misinterpreted. The word yoga itself, let's start with the word yoga itself and why it even started before we get to hot yoga. 6,000 years ago, people were suffering. And so the tribal leaders, the shamans, were the first ones to realize there was a problem going on, and then intuited the solution. The problem that they realized, which we continue to carry with us to today is that we feel we're separate beings, separate lives. We're not connected. And therein lied that loneliness of suffering. They choose the word yoga because the yoga now was the solution, which means the yoke to connect us with the universe, to connect us with God or whatever God means to you. That's why I think yoga is so cool, is because it's so Unitarian. It doesn't have to be the yogic concept of God. It's your concept of God, what that means to you. Very Unitarian. So it's a lot of people that this is the first misnomer. A lot of people believe that it's the union of the body, mind, and soul, or your body, mind, and your soul. But then that's part of it, but it's an incomplete definition. When I do my teacher training programs, I talk about a sphere. So the bottom part of the sphere is our body, our mind, and our soul, and how yoga will heal it. But that prepares the body, mind, and soul for the immersion, for the connection, the universe, connection to God. It's like my favorite metaphor is the middle of the Sistine Chapel. And I've been there a few times. It's one of my favorite places to go, where Adam and God just about touch fingers. It's the perfect metaphor to what yoga is. So not your mind and your body and your soul, but to have the connection. I know there's these, I think it's in South America, there's this whole bunch of trees that are connected through thousands of kilometers or miles, and they're all connected through a single root system. It's the same thing. We're connected, we're rooted together, but it's an ethereal root system. It's not physical. And we connect to it into our meditation, and that's the spiritual part. All right. Now we're going to skip ahead to, so 6,000 years ago is when yoga started. Now 900 years ago, only 900 years ago, is when the creation of Hatha, or properly pronounced in Sanskrit, Hatha Yoga, started. Two guys, Matsyendra and Goraksha. And this is the next misnomer of that word. If you were to go to a yoga studio, let's say anywhere in the West, and then when I say West, I mean anywhere outside of India, most likely you're going to a yoga studio where you're going to do yoga postures. We call that postural yoga. If you were to take a Hatha yoga class in one of those studios, or many of those studios, not all of them, but many of them, many times it'll be a gentle form of asana. And this is the second misnomer. It is exactly the opposite of what the word means. So Matsyendra and Goraksha were the guys that created Hatha. More so, Goraksha is his name. And we talk about him a lot in our teacher training program. He chose the word Hatha. It's not a gentle form of asana. It's the exact opposite. The word Hatha means forceful. So the metaphor I like to use, I got from Georg Feurenstein, who's the author of all the textbooks that I prescribe for my trainings. George Feurenstein. It's like the hammer that hits the anvil. When you take a piece of metal to a blacksmith, he puts it on a big anvil. So when the hammer hits the anvil, the Kundalini Shock, the energy which lays dormant in most people, awaken up the spine. So we use the spine and the brain to awaken the energy. And as we do so, not only do we balance the body and the mind, but we begin to connect through that root system, that spiritual root system. That's their way of finding that immersion, finding that connection. Okay. So then for some reason, we think that Hatha Yoga is this gentle form, and it's the exact opposite of what it is. And it's not just asana. Hatha, or Hatha Yoga, is not just asana, but it's also pranayama. In fact, back 900 years ago, with Goraksha, Matsyendra, they were practicing more pranayama, which is breathing techniques, various breathing techniques, hundreds of them, to awaken that Kundalini Shakti energy. It wasn't until, now we're really going ahead, 100 years later, or 800 years from then, so 100 years from now, or back from now, that the exaggeration of the athleticism of the yogic posture came to fruition. It came through two guys. One guy we call Krishnamacharya. It's a whole different type of yoga or different kind of lineage. Our particular lineage, hot yoga, comes from a guy named Vishnu Ghosh. So I'm not going to get into Krishnamacharya, but these are all different styles of hatha yoga that were inspired by Goraksha. So now Vishnu Ghosh is the forefather of what we call hot yoga, our form of hatha or hatha yoga. So why is it hot? Do we just turn on the heat? Because, and that's a thing now, they have not just hot yoga, they got hot Pilates, they got hot HIIT, they got hot everything. When I say hot yoga, I'm talking about this particular style of hatha yoga that came from Vishnu Ghosh in Calcutta, India. State of Bengal, city of Calcutta. Vishnu Ghosh's Vishnu Ghosh's older brother was Paramahansa Yogananda. We'll talk about that in a second. So Vishnu Ghosh, one of his top students was Bikram Choudhury. And here's how, let's back up for a second. Why hot? If I were to say Ghosh yoga, now there's a couple people that are now calling this particular yoga Ghosh yoga because of Vishnu Ghosh. That might make it simpler because it's not just turning on the heat. You could do, let's say, an Iyengar or a Kripalu yoga class in a hot room. I would say you're not doing hot yoga. You're just doing a Iyengar in a hot room. But you can do Ghosh yoga in a cold room and you're still doing hot yoga. So think of it as a noun, not an adjective. But that's the name we got. And so how did the heat happen? Good question. Maybe that would be a question you'll answer me later on. How did the heat happen? In Calcutta, it's like South Florida, but even hotter. It's 105 degrees in the summertime with 100% humidity. So they say open the windows and you're doing hot yoga and you're sweating profusely. When I was in India, I remember we went to a Gandhi museum and we went inside the museum where they didn't have air conditioning, came out and we were just soaking wet, like a wet t-shirt contest. It's ridiculous. Just sobbing wet. So Bikram now goes to Japan. Vishnu Ghosh had an affinity for Japan. In fact, I have a whole bunch of teachers that I've trained over the years now in Tokyo and just one recently too. And we've always had a connection with Japan. So Bikram goes to Japan and it's not 105 degrees in the summertime. It's freezing cold. So he couldn't figure out what to do. So that's when he came up with the concept, getting space heaters or heat lamps, putting them in the room, and there started hot yoga. Then Bikram went from Japan to Hawaii to San Francisco, and he ended up in Beverly Hills. That is where I met Bikram in Beverly Hills. So let's back up to Vishnu Ghosh for a second. Vishnu Ghosh, he actually didn't just do yoga. He combined yoga with gymnastics, with track, with wrestling, and mostly with weightlifting and bodybuilding. So he combined weightlifting and yoga and used that as his approach to getting the body healthy. Because what happened with Vishnu Ghosh, real quick, when he was young, he took ill. And his brother, Paramahansa Yogananda, arguably one of the most famous yogis that ever came to the United States from India, prescribed to him a series of yogic asanas. Vishnu Ghosh practiced those postures and had this miraculous healing, then decided to dedicate his life, and this is really important, to using the yogic postures as a healing modality. Nowadays, we look at it almost more as a means for just keeping our bodies healthy, keeping ourselves physically fit. Vishnu Ghosh's intention was when people had problems, instead of going to the physical therapist or going to the acupuncturist, they come to Vishnu Ghosh. They come to his Ghosh's College of India in Calcutta. That's actually where I got my teaching certificate from Ghosh's College of India in Calcutta back in 1981. I hate to throw out the years, but it's true. So when Bikram came to the United States, he took out the whole weightlifting and training, and I think he was smart to do that, and just focused on yoga. That was his approach to the process. So then I became one of Bikram's most senior teachers. Actually, I was his most senior teacher for about 18 years. And then we split up. And a lot of you know that are on this feed, I can see. So my approach was a little different than Bikram. And then I actually took a lot from that Krishnamacharyan side. We were talking about this other style of yoga. I was exposed then because I started representing Bikram in all these yoga journal conferences back in the late 90s. And I started to get influenced by different poses that we didn't do, like revolving triangle, for example. When you take a person that's doing a Bikram class and is only doing triangle in one direction, now take them the other way, you're now introducing this new range of motion that I thought could be very valuable. Very much so like bodybuilders. Their concept is you don't want to always do the same routine when you're lifting weights. You want to change it up. You want to do a different routine, even though you're doing the same body part, let's say 3 days later, but in a different way. So I felt the same way about this. So yes, a lot of my class is consistently the same, so we can measure our results, but then I change it up on a daily basis so we can dive into different areas of the body. Okay. So now, once again, if you are just signing on, and I can see we've got a whole bunch of people now that we didn't have before, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the little bell so you get notified every time I post a new video, which is going to be starting next Tuesday. Hopefully, my editor will have all our videos ready to go for the next Tuesday. He's actually on right now too. So Nikki, if you make sure you get those videos ready. Next Tuesday is going to be our next video. That's going to be the recorded video. And then if you hit that little bell, you get notified when I post that video. All right, so now let's talk about the body. Remember, I promised body, mind, and soul. Let's talk about the body next. So the body, I just got my Starbucks, so watch out, was what most people associate with when we talk about hot yoga or our form of hatha yoga. The body, you're not just going to get flexible. That's another misnomer about yoga. Oh, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible. I wish I was more flexible than this person. The strength and the flexibility are equally important because you have to be able to control that flexibility. My mother had extremely flexible hips, but she couldn't balance for more than 5 or 6 seconds because she didn't have the support in her body to sustain that position. So when I'm looking at a person's achievement as they and their improvement, I'm looking at both physical, I'm looking at both the strength and the flexibility combination. So let's talk about physics for example, or physiology. In bodybuilding and in running, when you're contracting a muscle, let's say like for a curl, for example, you're contracting this muscle. What's happening is, let's say I've got a 25-pound weight. After a very short period of time, I'm not going to be able to lift that weight anymore because I'm going to build up lactic acid. And then the body will definitely fatigue and it will stop me from lifting that weight more than, X amount of time. In yoga, it's the exact opposite. Even though we are strengthening and we're balancing and we do have cardio going on, there's an extension of the body through the stretch. So now the blood and oxygen is not restricted. Therefore, it is not building up lactic acid. And therefore, we could do yoga conceivably, physically, all day long. And we did. Back in my day, during my teacher train program, we did 4 classes of hot yoga a day. 4 classes a day. Once in a great while, we would do 5, sometimes 3, Saturday we would do 2, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. That would be like our day off. But we did take Sunday off. And I'm actually a proponent to that. Taking at least 1 day off a week, I think is really great because it helps to heal the body. I know in the Bikram world, they do a 30-day challenge. You can do yoga for 30 days. We have a 60-day challenge to do 40 classes in 60 days. I'd rather you do a double class 1 day and take Sunday off. Just my own little theory, philosophy. I think it's better for the body. So when you're extending that energy and not restricting the flow of blood and oxygen, you can conceivably do yoga all day long. And we did. I mean, Bikram really raised the bar for us, because Bikram used to always say, even though he exaggerates a lot, but he used to always say, I do yoga like, he would say 18 hours a day or 16 hours a day. We were just trying to keep up with him. I mean, 4 classes is really only 6.5 hours. So I doubt he did 16, 18 hours a day. Maybe he did when he was young. Who knows? But anyway, yeah, days off can definitely, someone just said days off always makes you stronger. I totally agree with that. So now we have the circulation flowing. We're definitely going to get stronger, and we're going to get more flexible. And there's that endorphin rush that comes in, and then stamina too. So this is one of the things I tell people how you can improve in yoga. Maybe the most profound thing I'll tell you this whole video. You got to find your starting point, wherever that may be. Every single pose, you want to find it without judgment. Because if you judge it, if you say, oh, I had somebody the other day send to me and says, Jim, I just can't get that standing hip to knee. I struggle with that balance. I just can't get that leg out there. I said, but you're doing the posture. So go where you can maintain the position. But if you're having the negative association with where you are, that negative thought ripples into your physiology and actually slows down the process. But if you can find, and this is for every pose, and everybody's different and every day is different, find your starting position each day without judgment. And all your only goal is the next inch. I know we got some people in Europe, next 2 centimeters. That's it. We were talking about this the other day. We were doing full splits. And I said, if you can go 1 inch a day, in 30 days, you're going to get a full split. You can go 1 inch a day, you're going to see such an improvement. And that's now, with that tangible goal, the mind will absorb and understand it, and that'll be a lot easier for your body to respond. Because your body, when you're going too fast, trying to push too hard, your body's going to resist it, and it's going to lock you out of the pose. So find your starting point without judgment. Find the next inch. Find the next 2 centimeters. And then the second part, less in the beginning, more at the end. Less in the beginning, more at the end. Because your body's strong in the beginning of the pose. If you're going to push it, it's going to fight you because it has the strength, it has the endurance at that point. But toward the end of the pose, that's when it starts to fatigue and it starts to let go. So I always tell people, in your mind, I was just telling somebody just like 2 days ago in class, in your mind, you want to not generate too much energy getting into the pose. He's putting 90% of his energy trying to get into the position. And when he was there, he only had 10% left in his tank to kick with. And then he would give up. He'd give up early. Take 10% of your energy to get to the pose in your mind and in your body. And now you got 90% left in your tank to go to your full position and your full expression. Big difference. Less in the beginning, more at the end. Your body becomes energized, and there's this extraordinary high that you're going to get after class. And you're now making a future investment in your health. Vishnu Ghosh would say, the class you're doing today, the true benefit will be 5 years in the future. You're still getting residual benefit, but the real benefit's going to be 5 years in the future. Now, when you start doing yoga for more than 5 years, You're going to be getting the initial benefit of the feeling of that class and the 5 years retroactively that you've been accumulating, kicking in at the same time. That's why I say it gets better. As I get older, I'm healthy. I did have 2 hip replacements about 3 years ago, but it was a genetic thing. It was a genetic thing. I always had a tough time with my hips. That was always one of my downfalls. Hamstrings was no problem. In fact, I was telling the same thing to that guy the other day. He said to me, he was having a tough time with standing head to knee and standing bow, but his hips were extremely flexible. And I said to him, well, I can't do what you can do with your hips, but I can straighten my leg in standing bow, or at least be able to. So you want to trade? You can take my hamstring and I'll take your hips. So the point is, what you have, do not make a judgment, and you will continue to improve if you put forth your best effort and you're consistent within your practice. I say that all the time. And of course, you're doing the right thing. You want to make sure you're in the right position. A trained teacher is going to help you get there. I'll definitely help you get there. It's like the key that unlocks the door. You got to get those tumblers in just right. Consistent practice. What do I mean by that? How long should you be doing yoga for? Or how many times a week? I think 4 should be minimum. 5 and 6, ideal. 3, you're always playing catch up. So when I did my 5-6 classes a day, I took off Sunday, Monday would be my stiffest day. Monday would be my tight day. So if you're taking every other day off, every day for you is Monday. My most flexible day and strong day was Friday. So you want to build to it. So if you did 4 classes a day, I would say do them in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row. That's for sure. Okay, let's now get to the mental part as I shift my little paper over. Once again, actually, let's go back to the heat real quick, because I just see here, I forgot to tell you about that. First of all, why the heat? Let's go back to the blacksmith again. This is Bikram's favorite metaphor. If you take a piece of steel or metal to the blacksmith and you tell him you want a sword or a knife, what's he going to do? The first thing he's going to do, put it in the fire, heat it up, get it soft, and then he can move it any way he wants. If you were to start banging on that steel with your hammer, cold steel, you're going to break your hammer. So we get into the room, and with the combination of doing the right position and right alignment and the heat, your body now transforms. How hot should we get it? That's a big question. And we have in our teacher training program manual a whole heat index. So that's because that's key. It's not how hot you get the room, the temperature. It is how high is the humidity? How high is the humidity? Because the humidity sets the heat index. So for example, in South Florida, it is 100% humidity in the summertime, and it gets up to about 100 degrees. I can't have the heat past 98. I don't know what that is in Celsius. I think it's like 38, maybe 37, something like that. Who knows? Maybe somebody can do a quick calculation on Google. I think 40 is 100 degrees. I can't get the room near 100 degrees in the summertime. People will die because of the humidity. Now, on the other side of that coin, if I'm teaching a class in Las Vegas or Colorado, I can get the temperature up to 105, even maybe 106, 7 degrees, because the humidity is much lower. So you have to really gauge it from the humidity level, and that's going to set the heat index. It's interesting too, because in South Florida, we do most of our structures have concrete cinder blocks, so they don't insulate the outside walls. So when it gets cold in the yoga school, when in Florida, the cold comes through those cinder blocks. That's why it's hard to heat the room. But we actually found a really great heater. Some people are going to like it hotter than others. If you're doing hot yoga at home, how do you do hot yoga at home? Get a space heater. Or maybe you can isolate one room in your house. Now they've got this new thing called hot yoga dome. You can look it up on the internet, hot yoga dome. All right, anyway, I want to throw that in. Let's go to the mind. We went all the way back 6,000 years ago. Then we went 900 years ago. We're going to go right between it now, 2,000 years ago. A guy named Pantanjali set the groundwork for all the yogis for the at that moment on. He gave the yogis a roadmap. Pantanjala Yoga, and he wrote what's called the Yoga Sutras, which are 195 aphorisms put together in these. He wrote them on palm leaves, tied together by threads or sutures, hence the word sutra, which is just the thread. So the second, arguably most popular or most famous of the sutras, of the 195 sutras, is Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha means yoga is the restriction of the worlds of consciousness, or very simply, yoga quiets the mind. Pantanjala Yoga is about how he's going to find that immersion that we talked about before, is by quieting the mind. And in quieting the mind, Deepak Chopra has a really beautiful phrase. He says that the universe is waiting for us to reveal ourselves to it in the quiet space between our thoughts. So Pantanjala Yoga, even though he was a proponent of the yogic asana, he was more about stilling the mind and finding the immersion that way. We don't do in Hatha Yoga Pantanjali's prescription. We do more of the Goraksha prescription. We'll talk. It's in a whole other video we'll go over. Definitely a misnomer. A lot of people think all our yoga comes from Pantanjali, inspired by him, but it's not the way he prescribed the practice. It came more from Goraksha. You will find, and I know I do a little mini meditation after every Hatha Yoga class that I teach. It's so much easier to get still and quiet your mind right after the class, because one, you're tired, physically tired, but the mind now at the same time becomes very still. Now, I'm going to be doing some videos in the future on meditation and definitely techniques to quiet the mind, very specific techniques to quiet the mind, which you can see later on and I'll put them in the description. Once they're in there, you'll be able to see them on my channel. But especially after our yoga class, it's such a wonderful time to get quiet and get still. And so we nourish the body, we strengthen the body and quiet the mind, which is definitely, and we're also doing Raja, and some people call Pantanjali Yoga Raja Yoga. We're doing it in the Hatha Yoga practice when we're completely in the moment. And the breath will connect the mind to the body. When we're completely in the moment, we're going to find that place of Raja Yoga, that mental focus. We find our drishti, looking at a spot on the floor for our balance. We find it. Okay, now the soul. How does hot yoga nourish the soul? Well, first of all of it nourishes the soul. We strengthen the body, we quiet our mind to nourish the soul. But how do we do it specifically? So I talked before about how Vishnu Ghosha's older brother was Paramahansa Yogananda. Not only was he his older brother, but he was also his guru. So Yogananda came to the United States. He was the second yogi that came to the United States from India in 1920. And his prescribed modality, or his prescribed technique to finding that immersion, the yoke, was a pranayama technique he called Kriya Yoga, which Vishnu Ghosh definitely practiced. Definitely did not teach it to Bikram. Bikram did not teach it in his class, even though he taught it to me a little bit on the side, but it wasn't something he did publicly. The Kriya Yoga, I shouldn't say ironically, not by coincidence, is the exact same concept of Goraksha's intention of Hatha Yoga to awaken what we call the Kundalini Shakti energy. The Kundalini Shakti energy lays dormant at the lower spine in most people. And as we practice our asana, and in this case in Kriya Yoga, our pranayama through this breathing technique, we awaken the Kundalini Shakti out of the center channel, or out of the lower spine, up the center channel. And as we do so, we begin to evolve spiritually. So there's this extraordinary, it's a means to find that immersion. As we slow the breath, as we lengthen the breath, according to the yogis, the ancient rishis, we begin to evolve. We begin to get rid of our karma. We get rid of all that bad karma that we have sort of accumulated over the years, and we can start to shed it through the lengthening of the spine, the lengthening of the breath through the spine. So Yogananda, he connects all the way back to his guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, his guru, Lahiri Mahashaya, his guru, Mahavatar Babaji, who brought Kriya Yoga out of the Dark Ages as a gift to humanity to find a way to release the soul. Now I'm getting a little bit out there. Out of the body. The soul becomes locked inside the body. And yoga, in this particular technique, frees the soul from the body. That's what they call the yogic power, the yogic city. You've heard of astral projection or out-of-body experiences. That's a glimpse to it. And as we do so, we find the immersion. Body, mind, and soul. We strengthen the body and get it nice and flexible to quiet the mind, and we nourish the soul, and the transformation continues to get better. So I was telling you long ago, I was driving home from that yoga class, and I can take this yoga with me anywhere I want to go because I can feel this wonderful wherever I go. It keeps getting better as I get older. It keeps getting better. So like I said, there's nobody who's been practicing hot yoga longer than I have. Maybe a few. That's for sure. So once again, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so, and hit that little bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. So I was telling you before, so here Vikram and I ended up splitting in 2002, and that's a whole nother video. I can tell you about that one time if you want to know about it. And I created my own style of hot yoga, but just like Bikram had his own approach, but still very much rooted back to Bishnu-Ghosh, back to Calcutta, back to Bengal. It's a Bengal yoga. Sometimes you'll see, if you're in my yoga school or other hot yoga schools, especially Bikram schools, you'll see the guru is sitting on a tiger skin. That's the symbol of the Bengal yogi because of the Bengal tiger. It's not that they kill the tiger. They just, when the tiger dies, they take off his skin, sit on the skin. Sometimes they'll sit on a deer skin as well. And then supposedly the deer or the tiger will go to a higher form of evolution if the yogi has chosen his skin to sit on. That's what they say. That's the Bengal symbol. So why was I even telling you that? I don't know. The Bengal, that's where so we're all rooted back to Vishnu-Ghosh. So now I've been doing teacher training programs, back in the 80s, I needed teachers. So I started teaching Bikram teachers. I was the only one that Bikram allowed to teach teachers beside himself. And then when we split in 2002, I created my own style. And that's when I've been doing my teacher training programs, which I continue to do. We did like 8 of them last year, mostly online, but sometimes in person, and sometimes both at the same time. And the whole online thing from this year has inspired me to do the channel. I also have an on-demand channel, which you can look up if you don't know about it. It's called hotyogaondemand.com. That's easy to remember. Hotyogaondemand.com. It's my own on-demand channel, and you get 7 days free if you go to that site. And various courses. I just now have a course on, you can become a 500-hour yoga teacher to do my online course. And that website is barkanhotyoga.com, barkanhotyoga.com. And last week, I just did a free hot yoga workshop, and you can see that workshop, by the way. If you go to barkanhotyoga.com, right at the top of the page, click on workshop or watch now, and you can watch a whole hour that I did on hot yoga and on the Barkan method. All right, now Let's go to some questions. Who's got some questions here? Okay. Let me see. Somebody wrote hot Kundalini Yoga. So that's another interesting word, Kundalini, because the Sikhs, guys with the white turban heads, they created their own style of yoga and they branded it Kundalini. And I was talking before about Kundalini. If you're inspired to raise the Kundalini Shakti, which we do in Hatha Yoga, I don't want you to think it's associated to that particular style of yoga or that particular technique. That's just one technique that also raises the Kundalini Shakti. But don't think that they own that word. That's something I wanted to say. Okay, questions. Where does the Bikram series sit with me now? Okay, good question. I actually even did a 26 and 2. That's what the Bikram series is. 26 postures, 2 breathing exercises. I did a training just last year in Blacksburg, Virginia. I don't know if Nicole's on here or not. I think she's supposed to be. In balance yoga. So I think that the 26 and 2, and the reason why Bikram chose the 26-2, these particular postures, because he wanted to be accessible for Western anatomy. In other words, a lot of postures in his advanced class, a lot of postures that Vishnu Ghosh taught him, especially back in the 70s, people in the United States, where he eventually came to, weren't able to do. So he chose a sequence. That's why he calls it the beginner yoga class. He chose a sequence that was more accessible, not just for Westerners, but especially for men who have big bone skeletal structures. And I think it's a great foundation. I did it for 18 years. That was my main practice to get stronger and more flexible. That being said, I was never subjected just to the 26 and 2 sequence, because I was doing Bikram's 91 posture advanced class 3 months into my practice every single day. So when I told you I did 4 classes a day of my teacher training program, one of them was the advanced class. So like I said before, I'm a proponent of liking to mix it up a little bit more, and which is actually closer to Vishnu Ghosh, to dive into one particular area. Like in the Barkan method series, we'll do back bend day. Just did that yesterday, where we do sometimes with 3 camels or with 3 wheel poses or 3 bridge poses. So we get deep into the back bends, or deep into hip openers another day, or deep into leg stretching another day, which is more similar to Vishnu Ghosh than Bikram, because Bikram wanted more an eclectic view. So I like the 26 and 2, and it's a great foundation. But if you only did the 26 and 2 sequence, just in my humble opinion, a certain rigidity will set in, because if you, like we said this before, if you take that Bikram person that's doing triangle into revolving triangle, take them the other way, they're going to have a tough time. So I like to bring the other range of motion to it. Okay, any studies about how the heat affects meditation? Should we try to get into a hot room to meditate? No, I don't think we should be in a hot room to meditate. Good question. It's okay to go into that meditation in Shavasana. The problem with it, you're actually better off, and this is definitely going to be another video that I'm going to be doing, you're better off sitting upright so the spine is free. When we want to raise the Kundalini Shakti energy or the pranic energy up the spine, if you're laying on the ground, you're going to restrict that flow, and you may fall asleep. So keeping your spine upright is better. So I believe that you want to be as comfortable as you can in meditation, because you don't want to be distracted. You'll be distracted in the heat, I believe. Why is it not good to end a class with a back bend is another good question. I just like and that's not just me. I mean, this is what always Bikram's rule of thumb too. Always finish in a forward bend to counteract that back bend motion. We're just not used to going backwards. And so when we go into a forward motion afterwards, it counteracts it. Yeah. Okay. That's another good question too. Any other questions? I'm looking to see. Once again, thank you guys so much for being with me today. I'm very touched by your support. I know we had a whole bunch of people on from all over the world, so that's very exciting. Once again, hit that subscribe button and ring that little bell. And make sure to watch out for my next video, which is going to be this Tuesday. My editor, Nikki, makes sure he's getting on the stick to get that happening. It was a pleasure to be with you today. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the future for all my future recorded videos, and we'll probably be doing some live ones as well. And I thank you so much for joining me, everyone. We'll see you next time. Take care.